Easy explain for speciation. So speciation is an evolutionary process. Really what we're going to be looking at is the formation of new species. So first off, what is a species? A species is any group of organisms, any population that can reproduce effectively, physically, and create fertile offspring. That's the real key thing here. You can reproduce, and then your offspring will also someday, upon their own maturity, also be able to reproduce, right? They're fertile. That's key. So that's what we mean when we're making a new species, right? We're making a new group of individuals that is true for. But how do we get there? Well, there's some key ingredients to make a new species over time as you go through this process of speciation. We're going to be involving the evolutionary mechanisms, right? All 5 of them that we've already covered: natural selection, sexual selection, gene flow, genetic drift, and mutations. But we also need to add something new. We need to add some kind of isolating barrier. We need to keep this population separated from others of its group, right? If it's going to become a new species, it kind of needs to be left alone somewhere, in some way, shape, or form. We'll get into those isolating barriers here today. And of course, like all things biological, especially in terms of evolution, we're going to have to work some time into this as well. Right, so what is speciation? It's this big process involving the evolutionary mechanisms, isolating barriers, and time. Eventually, we're going to get new species. So we can really even think of this process as a formula, right? Kind of more of like a theoretical formula, right? There's really not any math going on here. It's kind of just a conceptual equation, if you will. So you can see that right there. But what are these barriers, right? This is really the new content for the day here when we get to speciation. We've already gone over the mechanisms. Time is a given, right? What are these barriers? So really, fundamentally speaking, when we talk about a group of the population being separated, being isolated, we're really talking about them being isolated reproductively. We're going to separate this group, and only some are going to be allowed to reproduce with others, right? That's going to be our main barrier here. So how does that reproductive isolation work? It really kind of branches off into 2 possibilities, and we call those either prezygotic or postzygotic. Zygotic, weird word, just means of the zygote, right? Of the fertilized sperm-egg combo. So prezygotic means we're never even going to get to that zygote. There's going to be no mating at all. So maybe that's what we assume when we're thinking isolation. But there's also this weird phenomenon of post-zygotic isolation, meaning we made the zygote, but for a number of kind of complicated genetic reasons, we still can't make the offspring, or at least fertile offspring. We'll get into that one. But let's start with prezygotic, this type of isolation. Scroll down a little bit here. So prezygotic isolation is really any barrier that prevents any zygote from ever forming. The egg cell and the sperm cell will never meet. No zygote will even be formed because the organisms just simply aren't, they're not meeting. They're not mating. There's really 3 ways that this can happen, right? 3 ways that you can be prezygotically isolated. The first here is geographically, right? You're just separated in physical space. You're just in different locations. So think like different sides of the Grand Canyon, right? 2 different populations there will not meet. That's way too much space to cross for something like a little squirrel. The other possibility is your behaviors, right? Especially when we're talking about animals, right? Larger mammals, we got brains, we got behaviors. We have preferences, like where we choose to live. It could be a choice. We could just actually be able to move somewhere and just want to, right? It could not be something like the Grand Canyon. We just want to move away. Or maybe food, right? We're being attracted to different foods. We have different diets. We're valuing different nutritional resources. We're just eating different things in different locations, and we got different behaviors. We're just not going to be attracted to each other for mating. Third and finally here for prezygotic isolation could also just be timing, right? Maybe our mating cycles are off. Maybe you're trying to mate in the daytime, I'm trying to mate at night. Could be seasonal. You're out there in the spring, I'm out there in the fall. Our timing just isn't lining up. So in all 3 of these cases, this is going to be prezygotic isolation. The egg and the sperm are never going to meet. Pretty big barrier there. But then we also have postzygotic, and this is the one that a lot of people think of as the weird one, right? Where we are mating. The egg and the sperm are meeting. But for a number of reasons, usually genetically speaking, like an incompatible number of chromosomes, Mitosis and meiosis don't work out properly. Just the zygote might not survive. That's possible. Or it could survive. The individual could be born, but maybe they're sterile, right? They can't produce their own sex cells, their own gametes. And this is usually what we usually see this in hybrids, like mules. You have a horse and a donkey, you get a mule. Mules are sterile. The only way to make them is through hybridization with a horse and a donkey. So that'd be post-zygotic, right? They're actually, if they're isolated for long enough like this, and we have the 5 evolutionary mechanisms working, give it time, and we could see the rise of new species here for any of these reasons. So these are the big takeaways here. When we look at speciation, we're seeing these new barriers. Add these to the 5 evolutionary mechanisms we've already covered. Give it some time, and you got a new species.